Hey, it's Kate. I hope you're having a great day. What's in the garden today? Well, we are taking apart this bulb lasagna and we're going to see what's in there after a year. This is probably not the best time of year to be doing this, but this container was less than spectacular and I don't want to leave it the same for another year. So let me tell you what happened last spring and let's find out what happened to the bulbs in the meantime. As you can see, a few things have started growing again. I believe this is the grape hyacinth, so we'll have to be gentle with those. Here we go. Let's see what we find.
I made this bulb lasagna last fall, so it's been a year, and I'd rate it as below satisfactory. I would not say it was great. I think the idea and concept was good, but the execution was the problem. Mainly that I had put too many bulbs in, and also I think it needed more water, but the water might have been related to there being too many bulbs, like they were using the water really fast, so it needed more. The top layer is mixed crocuses. They did pretty well since they were first and early in the season. They were an adorable little ray of sunshine while the weather was still cold. They came up well, but so did everything else. You could already tell that there was way too much stuff in the pot, and the foliage was quickly getting out of hand. So the crocuses were getting swallowed up in all the other foliage. The next layer is mini daffodils and Muscari, aka grape hyacinth. These were super cute and were supposed to flower second after the crocus, but instead the daffodils started flowering before the crocus were finished, which was not the plan. Eventually the crocus finished and we had the Muscari and daffodils flowering, but again, these flowers were quickly getting swallowed up by the next foliage. Also, I was starting to have trouble with the watering at this point, so my usual solution for pots is to give them more shade to slow down evaporation. It's at least a good temporary solution, but I was also having trouble with the flowers getting floppy, which maybe was a result of both not enough water and not enough sunlight. Not sure if that's true, but it's a gut feeling. My other problem at this point was very specific to me, in that my 4-year-old was picking the daffodil flowers. So the pots should have had more color than they did. The next layer below the daffodils was tulips and summer snowflake. Again, these started flowering before the daffodils were finished, so the daffodil display got cut short. And unfortunately, because the flowers were not going as I hoped, I stopped taking video and photos of them. But definitely, the container was having trouble getting enough moisture by now, so the tulips suffered the brunt of this. The variety of tulips was super cute, but they got dried out earlier than they should have, so they didn't get a good chance to photosynthesize, and I think some of them didn't even flower because of the poor conditions. Alright, these are all the bulbs I pulled out of that one pot. First off, holy smokes, that's a lot of crocus. I think every bulb multiplied and made more bulbs, so that's got to be way more than I put in originally. The Muscari, famous for duplicating and spreading, did just that and made plenty of baby bulbs. The daffodils did the worst of all of these bulbs. At least half of them were rotten, and I think only 1 or 2 of them might have divided into new bulbs. All in all, fairly disappointing. The summer snowflake were fine. All of the bulbs were growing new roots and shoots, although one of the bulbs was looking fairly questionable. The tulips were fairly interesting. There were a number of rotten bulbs, but there were also a number of bulbs that were dividing into new bulbs. I think I came out slightly ahead. All these bulbs together, I think I did pretty well, but the display they put on in the spring was not so great. I still think the lasagna style container is a good idea, but, a big but here, I wouldn't do it the same way. Number one, I would use probably half as many bulbs as I did in this one, and then I would design it one of 2 ways. Either I would skip the daffodil layer and only plant early spring flowering crocus and late spring flowering tulips, so I would skip anything labeled as mid-spring flowering. I would still be hesitant about this though, because the tulip foliage was still coming up so early that it could interfere with the crocus, but it would be an improvement from what I had. So that's one option. The other option, and I haven't tested this out, it's just a theory in my head, and you'd have to be quite careful while planting. But it seems to me you could still use the same layers if you carefully arrange them into timing zones. So I'd choose one side of the pot as the front and the other the back. So then starting at the back and the deepest, I would plant the back third as late spring flowering tulips. The next layer would be the center third and the middle depth. That would be daffodils. And then the front third, which would be the top layer, I'd plant as crocus. So what I'm imagining is that the crocuses would come up first in the front of the container, and at that point, the other foliage will be emerging behind the crocus. Then the daffodils will bloom next behind the crocus, and then following that, the tulips behind the daffodils. So as the season progresses, the foliage of the next flowers won't interfere with the previous. And you would also be able to enjoy all the flowers, even if there's some overlap in the timing. I think it might be tricky to execute this, but that's what I'm going to try. And I'm going to reuse these bulbs that I've pulled out today. So fingers crossed that this will work.